Miyune did more than just treat me to dinner. She gave me a pair of night clothes, left me alone to bathe, and waited patiently outside in the meantime. I emerged from the bathroom to find her seated with a small cloth and a pair of slippers. She looked at me and smiled, then rose from her seat. "If you would, take my place, Kea." I sat where she'd been, and then she dropped to a knee. What was going through this woman's mind? Out of anything she could have been doing with her time, why did she choose to spend it drying my feet? She took the slippers and put them on me. They felt soft and wonderful, and were probably the best slippers money could buy. "Are you all right, truly?" she asked. Yes. I'm just a little tired." I'd really had no clue what to say. "Then let us see to that." This didn't seem as simple as her just using me, and yet I couldn't imagine it was any other way. I was no commoner back home, which meant she must have had a purpose for taking me. If she pawned me back off to my people, the first thing I'd do is search for death, because there was no way I could endure my old life any longer. I'd raise my fingernails to my throat, if that's what it took. I couldn't let things get to that point. She led me to a room drizzled with dark chocolate furniture and frosted with tempting silk sheets, of which rested upon a king-sized bed. Flowers were strewn about, which explained why the room smelled so good. I gawked and dawdled around to the room's center, where Miyune caressed me on the head. "Do you like it?" she said. "This is wonderful. Is this room yours?" "No, my dear, it is yours." What was the point of all of this? Fears aside, I relished the idea of living in a room like this, if just for a little while. She smiled with reassurance. Her subtle chuckle was an indication she'd picked up on my distrust. I was nothing if not a convincing face, so this surprised me. I didn't have a reply for her. In turn, she nudged me towards the bed. "Do you like this shade of red, Kea? It just screams Sohalia and noble." Sohal? I'd heard of it from forbidden texts. That would make where I now resided the world of Unraveling, Lathine. Nobody back home would have ever dared kidnap me, so I'd known from the beginning my abductors were likely otherworldly. Still, I'd never thought something like this could ever happen. Sohal, Hadia, El Ritheo, Dial, and Milkar? Are those the nations of Lathine? Miyu raised me an eye. "You are quite knowledgeable, my dear. I bet you even know what lays beyond Lathine." I wasn't sure whether she was referring to some place beyond the waters of Lathine, or of the other worlds that laid beyond. "I don't think I do. I'm sorry I'm not very knowledgeable, Auntie Miyu." Again, I'd honestly had no clue what to say. She kissed me on the forehead and left things be. "Would you like to rest for the night, my dear? You must be exhausted." That sounded good to me. If she left me alone to rest, then I could poke around and maybe learn a thing or two. "I'm very, very tired, so I think that's a smart plan," I said, throwing in a yawn for good measure. "I do hope you get good sleep, Kea. Find a maid should you need anything, and do feel free to call for me Of course, Auntie Miyu. Thank you. She made her way to the door and departed without another word. There I laid, all alone, in the most comfortable bed I'd ever had. And yet sleep was the last thing on my mind. I let a quarter of an hour go by before making the leap to my feet. I was paranoid. She might have been waiting on the other side of the door for me to act, hence why I waited so long. My little feet tippy-toed and tappity-tapped up to the door, then my ears flew against it. With any luck, I could confirm the presence of a soul, or better yet, the likely lack of one. There was nothing. Or nothing I could hear, at least. I wagered there was no harm in gambling and talking my way out if things went poorly. I opened the door and took a quick peek down both sides of the hallway. Sure enough, there really was nothing. I was all alone, or so I thought. A familiar presence made itself known, and a shiver ran down my spine. Something started to tug at my soul. Something sinister. An air of malice went around my neck like a noose. If a maid should come wandering my way, I'd say something to the tune of, "I'm thirsty, may I please have a drink?" Yes, I was sure I could make people go away. But what I couldn't make go away was the shadow, which was now ready to take shape in this realm. It had followed me as long as I'd lived. Sometimes it took the shape of a specter in the shadows, and other times it took the form of fire red eyes. Left or right? Left or right? How about left, I guess? Honestly, it didn't really matter which way I chose. All that mattered is how well I went about traversing which path I did choose. Luck proved to be with me, and Miyune's hallways were lit with nothing more than candlelight. Candlelight and torchlight was about all I'd had back home, so I knew how to make use of them. I'd watch the way they ticked around corners, and use their hints to detect oncoming movement. Deciphering hidden presences with a lone flicker was second nature to me. Also, I was small, so I could get away with popping my head around corners if I needed to. I know that sounds stupid, but it was true. I had no real plan, besides gathering any information I could. What I found first was a beautiful study, decorated with reds, vibrant dark oak, and plush furniture. It was lined to the brim with books and scrolls, which was more than enough to lure me in. A certain light from above also intrigued me. It was seeping in from an overhead window. I went under to see what was causing the light, and what I saw couldn't have left me any more confused. We were underwater, I think. I wasn't sure what to make of the dark blue sight or the great white lantern that hung in the faraway distance. I stood around like a clown for the next 10 minutes, trying to make sense of it all. When at last I kicked from my daze, I started rummaging around the study. Like always, I was cautious not to leave anything so much as a hair out of place. History of Lathine, The Unraveling. So read a book. This sparked my interest. I'd heard of the unraveling of Lathine, albeit only from forbidden books in my homeworld. All knowledge not of our own doctrine was deemed wicked, and therefore knowledge from the other worlds was deemed most wicked of all. I went to work, brushed off some dust, and began to plow through the massive tome. I was curious to see if the so-called wicked teachings my father kept sealed away were accurate. So begins the day when fell King Mararuthos of Erloia began his wrath. Henceforth swooped the nation of Lathine, crushing his reign to dust, and far too much with it. There was no way I could finish the book anytime soon, so I decided to skim for tidbits of importance and key facts. In the end, I was rather disappointed. All I found was the same old facts I'd already known about the unraveling of Lathine. Though, I guess that in itself was a good thing, because now I knew the knowledge I already had could be relied on. I continued to raise the library. All I came up with was other books of irrelevant history and useless tales. Without any good reason to stay in the study and hold out luck for something big, I passed on and made my way further through Miyu's labyrinth. Attendants and servants were easy to evade, but those cursed eyes, that was another tale entirely. It wasn't possible to lose the eyes. Throughout the night, the eyes only furthered their materialization into the realm. Their fierce glow kept getting stronger, and they kept inching closer and closer and closer. I ended up finding a kitchen, the dining hall, a few elegant restrooms, and a locked door. I fumbled around with the doorknob and hoped to work some magic. But alas, I couldn't. With nothing to show for, I cut my losses and gave up. I was already on my way off when fate spat something my way. A sound met my ears. A faint sound. I couldn't make anything out from it. I went back and pressed my ear against the door. One last time, I heard it, the same indistinguishable sound. Where had I heard it before? Honestly, I had no clue. But for some reason, I started to feel anxious at the thought, and my hand started to twitch. Without any way in, I was forced to move on. Not long after, I peeked around a corner and saw two men guarding a door. I'd wager it was the way out. On the flip side, the furthest way I could go, in the opposite direction, led me to another blocked off door. From the shadows, I saw a lone attendant sitting by. She must have been at the weight of Miyune. That would make it Miyune's bedroom, right? That was the last area for me to explore on the ground floor. I waltzed my way up to the second flight, where there proved to be even less of interest. Story number 2 was nothing more than a collection of guest rooms and a room for lounging. Here I would have thought there was nothing to the upstairs, if I didn't try the last door that I did. Yet again, I found a locked room. There really was no way out of here. I decided to call it a night, rather than give the eyes any time to get closer, or risk the prospect of being caught. By now, the power of the eyes had grown strong. They emanated a red aura from behind that illuminated the path ahead, making it appear as if it were drenched in blood. I went straight back to my room and didn't dare to take another detour. There wasn't a reason to keep bumbling on since there was nothing else to learn and no way out. Right? I may as well rest in the meantime, for when a pivotal time did present itself, wouldn't you say? Darkness reigned. I laid in bed. So began the voices, the laughs, the breaths that ran down my neck, and the spider-like hand that tickled through my hair. Whispers ran out, one after another, and echoed into my ear.
Keha.
They said, one and the same.
Keha, do you wish to die yet? We will help you. Are you ready to die?
I was thankful to know that the spirits would vanish by morning, as was the norm. I just had to endure a little while longer.
Just open your eyes. We will help you. Just open your eyes.